As I already introduced myself, my name is Amy Stemick, and I am the head of Children's Services at the Goodnow Library in Sudbury, right down the road. And I've been a librarian for over 21 years. I started out in academic libraries, and I also did work in several different archives. Then I moved into adult reference services, first at the Marlborough Public Library, and then at the Acton Memorial Library. And then about 12 years ago, I transitioned into children's services, and I've been at Goodnow ever since. So thank you so much for inviting me here today to talk about this important topic. So today I plan to define some terms, then dive right into the context of this historic moment in censorship that we're experiencing right now in the United States. I'm going to share some stories, local stories, some personal stories, and then at the end offer some action, sort of action items if people want to get involved. And then we can have a Q&A. Okay, so, oh, hold on, what's going on here? Okay, so I want to just start off by defining some things so we all are on the same framework. So what exactly is intellectual freedom? So intellectual freedom encompasses the freedom to hold, receive, and disseminate ideas without restriction. It is viewed as an integral component of a democratic society. The United Nations upholds intellectual freedom as a basic human right through Article 19 of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Libraries in particular value intellectual freedom as part of our mission to provide and protect access to information and ideas. So the American Library Association, or ALA, which I'm going to refer to it, you're going to hear a lot about ALA throughout this talk, defines intellectual freedom as the right of every individual to both seek and receive information from all points of view without restriction. It provides for free access to all expressions of ideas through which any and all sides of a question, cause, or movement can be explored. So there's sort of three main components, the first being expression, freedom of expression, which is both the ability to think and to speak your mind without legal repercussion. The second point, freedom of access. This is what libraries are all about. We curate human expression, books, movies, music, and we provide free exchange of ideas through speech, stories, and knowledge. And finally, the freedom from surveillance, or the right to privacy, which means that you may say, read, watch, listen to whatever you choose without the fear that it will be documented and used against you. So that is intellectual freedom. The American Library Association has a freedom to read statement. It was written in 1953, and this is just a quick little synopsis of it, but basically it's, we trust the people of this nation to make their own decisions about what they read and believe. And this was reiterated last year. 70 years later, we still trust them to make their own decisions. So, yeah. So we're in kind of a tumultuous time when it comes to book banning. And I just want to define some terms. So a challenge is a formal, well, it can be formal or informal. A challenge is an attempt to remove or restrict materials. A ban is the removal of materials, thereby restricting the access of others. And censorship is the broader kind of umbrella under which can be that ban, that removal. But it's really about the change in access status of material. So this can be, you exclude it from your collection, you move it, you take it from the children's room, you put it up in the teen room, or you take it from the teen collection, you put it in the adult. It can include things like restricting, like you got to ask for it at the desk, that kind of thing. So, and finally, adding disclaimers or altering materials can be another component of censorship. So censorship, we're not talking about just an absolute ban. It can be kind of a wider concept, if that makes sense. All right, so let's get into some numbers here. So this is from the American Library Association. So ALA has tracked challenges for decades, and things stayed pretty steady state. As you can see, this is the last 20 years of data collected by ALA, and the average over that time was about 273 books per year that were challenged. And this is important to note, this is unique titles. So this isn't every challenge that's been out there. This is every challenge for particular titles. Okay, so, you know, People have wanted to ban books from time immemorial. You know, it's something that's always there. But as you can see, in 2021, all of a sudden things really started to heat up. And then it was like an all-time record-breaking. And these are formal challenges that the American Library Association has tracked and documented. There's many, 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 many more informal challenges and formal challenges that haven't been reported. Okay, but this is just what's been reported. So then by 2022, it's almost doubled. By 2023, it's almost doubled again. And I'll tell you, we are on track for another doubling. Specifically in Massachusetts, during this time period, it increased 9-fold. And it's not just book challenges, and I'm going to get into this a little bit later, but it's challenges to programs, to services, to curriculum in schools. There have been harassments and threats to staff that are at unprecedented levels. You know, there have been educators and librarians fired across the country related to books and book challenges. There have recently been some bomb threats at some recent libraries, which we'll talk about. So it's kind of a tricky time right now. So what exactly happened in 2021 to light this fire? So we kind of know a little bit, but there's some specific things that happened. So in 2019, so a lot of people kind of track this back to 2019, the Heritage Foundation had a summit in which they called for attacking DEI and trans rights by going after books in schools and higher education. Then, of course, 2020 brought pandemic mandates, shutdowns. There was a messy transfer of presidential power, which kind of added fuel to a growing movement that combines many elements, but anti-government and anti-democratic sentiment is the through line. Another thing to note is that about 10 years ago, we finally see the breakthrough of Black, Indigenous, people of color, and queer writers finally being published and marketed by mainstream publishing houses. So there's been a movement for a long time called We Need Diverse Books, and we finally saw that movement kind of make that breakthrough, and mainstream publishing houses were willing to take on those stories and put real dollars behind the marketing of those books. So, you know, there's a growth there as well, which, you know, many people have been very happy about. But, you know, I think that plays a part in what's going on here. So the movement to ban books is deeply undemocratic in that it often seeks to impose restrictions on students and families based on the preferences of select individuals. And it continues to marginalize those who have always been marginalized, and also impacts all students who have a right to access a diverse range of stories and perspectives. So the good news here is that the Pew Research Center and Every Library Institute and ALA, they've been doing some sort of research and studies and surveys to see what is public sentiment. Overall, 71% of Americans are not in favor of banning books. They are not in favor of censorship. So that's kind of the good news. But if you go down a little further into the data, you see that there are a couple things that they are more willing to censor. And the biggest thing is LGBTQ plus materials. So that's kind of, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Okay, so this is a heat map of 2023 book challenges. So we're still in 2024, so we don't have the current data, but this is the most current data that we have. There have been 9,021 total reported challenges. But of course, those unique titles that we saw, that was 4,240 unique titles. Some of you may have heard that Massachusetts is 4th in the nation for reported book challenges, which might very much surprise you. I will give a caveat that one of the reasons we are leading is that the Massachusetts library system is tracking these things very, very well. So I think our tracking is higher than other parts of the country. I don't think for a minute that we're seeing the most, but you know, we're kind of in a blue bubble here, but there is still a lot of this activity going on. And there were 63 challenges last year in Massachusetts. 63 titles challenged. I would say that the nature of challenges have fundamentally changed since pre-2021. So in the past, and this was an experience I had, and some of you are librarians and may have experienced this, a parent would read a child out loud, or read a book out loud with their child, and they would encounter something and they would say, oh boy, I don't know if this is appropriate, and they'd come and talk to the children's librarian and say, I have some concerns about this book, and you would be able to have a civil conversation. And every library, or most all libraries at this point, have what's called a request for reconsideration form. So it's a formalized process if someone wants to challenge a book. And in most cases in the past, you wouldn't get to that point. You would have some civil conversations, some understanding, and you could kind of work your way through that. And I've had that experience a couple times in my career. But now there are some really well-funded pressure groups throughout the country that are attempting to censor collections and services. And they're using, we actually call it a censorship playbook. And they are using social media and tactics to really, I guess, spread this kind of throughout the country. And there's, now when we get a challenge, we can kind of tell where that's coming from. So a lot of libraries now have a requirement that if you're going to challenge a book, you must be a resident of that town. But that didn't used to be the case. So in a lot of libraries, they were taken off guard. So people have updated their policies. And you also must read the book in its entirety if you're going to challenge the book. And a lot of people don't do that. They'll come to us with a long list of all these books that they want removed. They have not read them. They have gotten them from their social media feed or via email. So that's kind of the change.
How do you know if they've read it or not?
I mean, you ask them.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they tell the truth?
I mean, so far, my experience, yes, they have told the truth and said, no, I have not read this in its entirety. So that's kind of what's going on now with that. So who initiates the challenges to censor books? The data is kind of muddy here. This is last year's data. So according to this chart, 28% are initiated by patrons that don't have children, 24% by parents, and 21% by pressure groups. But if we dig deeper, knowing how the pressure groups are using social media to encourage individuals to take up the work of book banning, the parent and the patron categories become kind of a team effort. And in my own personal experience, some of the folks who come in asking for books to be removed are not parents. Or maybe were parents long ago, but are not currently parents of children at the moment. So where do censorship attempts take place? In 2023, we saw a move towards public libraries more than school libraries. But prior to that, school libraries were ahead of public libraries. And kind of what's been happening here is that groups have really tried to ban books from school libraries and either have been successful or unsuccessful, but then are taking that cause to public libraries now. So what is being challenged, and what are the reasons for these books being challenged? The top 3 reasons are sexual orientation, gender, and race. Both the content of the material and the creator. So, particularly, Black, Indigenous, people of color, and queer writers are being targeted much more than others for the removal of their books. And you can see all these words, so sort of woke, indoctrinating kids, critical race theory. These are a lot of reasons, sexually explicit, obscene, containing profanity, pornography. That's a lot of what the challenges are claiming. According to PEN America, which is another group that's actively tracking book banning in the United States, 37% of the banned books last year had characters of color or themes of race and racism, and 36% had LGBTQ+ characters or themes. So specific stuff being targeted here. So what are some of these books? So a whole bunch of pictures of some of the books that are being challenged. Some are ones that we've long known are challenged. To Kill a Mockingbird, The Color Purple, Beloved, Catcher in the Rye, things that have always been, people have always been not thrilled about. But this over here are the 10 most challenged books from last year. And the vast majority are LGBTQ+ themes. And then there's even more back there. So as I said, last year there were 4,240 particular titles that were challenged in this country.
Can you read those 10 books?
Sure. Yeah, so Me, Earl, and the Dying Girl, Gender Queer, All Boys Aren't Blue, Let's Talk About It, The Perks of Being a Wallflower, The Bluest Eye, that's by Toni Morrison, Sold, This Book is Gay by Juno Dawson, Flamer, and Tricks. Yeah, and I will tell you, and I'll talk a little bit later, but this book is Gay, is the book that was challenged in the Acton Public Schools in late 2022, early 23. So, these are all books, but really the true censorship here is of people and their stories, and people not wanting those stories to be heard. Okay, so who exactly are these pressure groups that I am talking about? So this is a sampling of pro-censorship groups in Massachusetts, and all but one of them are homegrown. There's quite a few of them. We have Citizens Organized to Restore Rights, Parental Rights, National Socialist Club, the Super Happy Fun America Group, Mass Resistance, Massachusetts Family Institute, and one of their arms coming out of Massachusetts Family Institute is Massachusetts Informed Parents. And then at the very bottom is Moms for Liberty, which you may have heard of, which is a group that was formed in 2021 in Florida and has deep pockets and really, they're the ones who really have come up with what we call the censorship playbook. Sorry, my thing here is mixed up. Okay. So there are actually 2 chapters in Massachusetts of the Moms for Liberty group. There's one in Plymouth and one right here in Middlesex County. So there are a number of groups, but they are tiny, but they are very, very loud. And they are making big waves in our state and then throughout the country. So I want to go through a sampling of their arguments as to why books need to be removed from our collections in both school and public libraries. First off, their number one complaint is they say libraries have pornography and are criminally distributing it to minors. This is their argument. We do not. If we did, we would be prosecuted along with the authors, publishers, and distributors of those works. There are laws on the books. If that's what we were doing, we would be in big trouble. It is not what we are doing. Merriam-Webster's dictionary states that pornography is visual or written matter designed to cause sexual arousal. The standard for determining pornography considers the work as a whole. So one sex scene or a work devoted to the topic of human sexuality does not meet that standard. There's something called the Miller test. I could do a whole nother presentation about that, but that's sort of the legal test to determine if a book meets the obscenity, is obscene. They claim that librarians are groomers and pedophiles and our spaces are unsafe for children. And I personally have been called both of those things. In truth, libraries and librarians are highly trusted. In recent polls conducted by Pew Research Center, librarians are ranked in the top 5 most trustworthy professions, and 92% of parents feel their child is safe at the library. These groups say they stand for parental rights. The truth is, they represent a small fraction of parents, and they want to decide what is best for other people's children. You can ask the question, well, what about parents of color whose children need to see themselves reflected in literature? And what about queer families who are entitled to equal access and a place in the public sphere? Libraries stand for every parent making choices for their own children. They claim that it's not really banning a book if you can buy it somewhere else, but that's not a good argument because censorship by the government is a violation of the First Amendment. A private corporation's inventory in a bookstore and their choices are not. This argument's also false because people without a credit card or internet connection to view or buy items are denied access, right? And libraries are there to provide access to all, regardless of financial wherewithal. And finally, they argue that librarians select content based on our own personal biases. And we do not. We work very hard not to do that. We curate collections based on professional training and ethics. A host of criteria is spelled out in our collection development policies that we must follow and that guide our choices, like accuracy, quality, demand, cost, relevance to the curriculum or the community, and on and on. So But those are some of the arguments that they are making in school committee meetings across the Commonwealth, in library trustee discussions, things like that. So I want to talk about a couple cases right here in Massachusetts. So the first, this was in the summer of 2023, in June, in the town of Ludlow. There was a school committee member, so someone who was on the school committee, who brought a complaint to the school committee against his own district, claiming that its libraries needed to be rid of, quote, pornographic materials. He proposed banning dozens of titles from the libraries and, quote, any printed material or images that depict sexuality, including young adult fiction, health education books, and certain art images. His proposal would have also given the school committee the power to override librarians' decisions about their purchasing. There were hours and hours of public comments. Those of us in the field were watching this pretty closely. This personally made me very, very nervous. And there were a lot of people from all around the state that came in and made public comments. It kind of came out that the school committee member had actually copied his policy from a school district in Pennsylvania, clearly kind of using that playbook and getting information through other means. The school committee did hear the proposal, but at their June meeting that summer, but no one seconded the proposal, and it failed. So those books were retained. Here's another one that was a similar time period. This was in Medfield. This is a book, I Am Billie Jean King. It's part of a biography series that we have in our library, that most libraries have, geared towards kind of kindergarten, first graders. Can you guys read it? It's just, I Am Billie Jean King. So this was challenged because about Billie Jean King realizing her sexuality. And the particular challenged portion, the contested passage reads as this: around this time, I also realized I was gay. Being gay means that if you're a girl, you love and have romantic feelings for other girls, and if you're a boy, you love and have romantic feelings for other boys. Eventually, Larry and I stopped being married, and I fell in love with a wonderful woman. You can't choose who you fall in love with. Your heart will tell you. So this parent was very, very, very upset and filed a complaint about this book and wanted this book removed. The principal defended the book, but she did make the formal challenge. It was reviewed by the Reconsideration Committee and deemed appropriate, but she did not like that outcome. So she appealed the decision and took it up to the school committee. And she argued that it overstepped her right to protect her child, and she cited Massachusetts law, which allows parents to exempt their children from instruction on human sexuality, and including, according to her, LGBTQ+ topics. She questioned why she was not informed that the book was there, and she requested a list of all books in the library with similar themes. The school committee denied that, and the book was retained. But that's another recent example. And then I mentioned there was that book challenge in Acton on This Book is Gay. And that was heard in December of 22. And the ultimate decision was to retain the book in the high school, but I do believe that it was removed from the junior high. So that was the decision that was made there. I'm just going to quickly touch on a personal experience that I have had as head of children's in Sudbury. So in 2022, the director of the Sudbury Cooperative Preschool, which is located across the street from the library, reached out to me. And together we decided to have the first ever Pride Day for the community of Sudbury. And as part of that, we did what a lot of libraries are doing throughout the state. We had a drag queen story time. And when this advertisement hit prime time, I knew there would be some pushback, but I was not prepared for the amount of pushback that we were going to have on this. And I think one of the big things was that it was sponsored, it was at the preschool. I don't know, that really upset people that it was preschool. Anyway, so, we had a lot of calls. I had voicemails that were left for me, calling me a groomer and a pedophile, and how could I be doing this? The preschool actually took a lot of the heat. They actually received death threats about this, and it hit nationally, like it went on the national boards, social media, Facebook pages for a lot of groups throughout the country. And so we were hearing from people all over the country, not even Massachusetts, not even Sudbury, whatever. We went ahead, we held the event. It was amazing. We had over 700 people at this Pride Day. It was just the most lovely event ever. The drag queen, just read some lovely books about lovely things, and it was not sexual in any way whatsoever. And we were happy that day we only had one protester come in person. But we were quite nervous about how that was going to go. Some other things, I've had someone get very upset with me about a book display that I had on trans rights. And I had a couple parents, and this clearly I could tell was from sort of the censorship playbook, specifically want a book about how babies are made, removed from my collection. And when I went to go find the book on the shelf, I couldn't find it. And then I had some of my other staff look for it, and finally someone reached down behind, and there it was. Someone had stuffed it back there. So that's another thing that's happening throughout the country is books either just walk out the door and never come back, so it's sort of quiet censorship that they're doing on their own, or they are hiding the material. But to date, knock on wood, nobody has actually filled out a request for reconsideration form at the Goodnow Library. But we are prepared. We have also updated our program policy to sort of offer us some protection as well with regard to the decisions we're making there. Okay, recent trends. Things are getting kind of scary. The Reading Public Library had a lot of libraries have drag queen story times monthly or periodically throughout the year. The Reading Public Library had to evacuate, this was in March, from a bomb threat called in right as the drag queen story time was starting. And Somerville last month also had the same thing occur. And this just is just, yeah, scary for all involved and scary for the kids, I have to say. So just a couple things to think about. Really, it is up to parents to decide what is appropriate for their own children. The public library, in our library, you can't be there without your parents until you are the age of 10. So parents are involved in the browsing and also the checking out of the materials that their children are going to see. And so, it's a struggle to think that people want to remove things. They can just not take it out if it's not something that they want their own children to be reading. Librarians guide patrons to the items and programs which best suit them. The best counter to a bad idea is a good idea, not censorship. And children deserve to see themselves reflected in books. So a couple action items. Oh, I need to move ahead in my things here. So pay attention and vote in local elections. So I'm talking about school committee board member elections and library trustee elections, because there is a movement by those pressure groups that I showed you earlier to put people into those small, very local groups to make these kind of decisions. There is a bill right now in state legislature, Bill S-2839, that is proposed legislation to protect against attempts to ban, remove, or restrict library access to materials. It's currently in the Senate Ways and Means Committee, and if you are interested, you could reach out to your senator and representative and urge them to support this legislation. Show up at those trustee and school board meetings if you hear that anything like this is happening in your community, and speak out. You can join the Friends of the Library groups in your community as well to try to support the library. There's an organization called Fight for the First, and you can create a Fight for the First group in your community. And this would be of really wonderful help to your librarians in town, because when a challenge comes, there's only so much us as librarians and town employees can do. But if there's a group in the community that's also speaking out and saying these things and are standing in solidarity with us, that would be wonderful. And then just a little shameless plug, offer respect, encouragement, and cookies to library workers. Because we're kind of a little bit going through it. So then if you want to, I'll leave this, if you want to scan this, takes you to the American Library Association Library Bill of Rights, which is what is sort of guiding our profession on the decisions that we are making. So that's what I wanted to share with you guys today, but I am happy to answer any questions.
Go back one.
Yeah.
So I'm just wondering if there's any group that Massachusetts that would track school committee meetings that would.
Yeah, so that's a good question. So the Massachusetts Library Association has a social justice and intellectual freedom subcommittee, and they are actively tracking all of this stuff.
Did they publish that, or because we?
That's a good question. There's also the Massachusetts library system that's also sort of keeping track of this stuff, but is that actually published? That's a good question. I can reach out to the co-chair of that committee and ask. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm just curious. The focus of this all has been on books for children, and I'm wondering, is there anything in terms of books for adults? Are there any issues or?
At the moment, it's really focused on children and young adults. I think the argument really starts to get pretty weak when you're talking about restricting materials to adults, but there probably are situations, but I, as a children's librarian, this is what I've been hearing about, so sorry. Yeah.
You've put newest eye and the colored purple and even Gone with the Wind on the list.
Yes.
That's during adults. I kind of.
Right. Well, those have always been on the list, but my guess is that those have been on the list for, you know, curricula in high schools is I don't know actually, but historically, my understanding is that.
Question about, I was during the story out. Did these people want their children to think that everybody is nuclear family, male, female, and that's where the world works?
It is possible. I don't know. I guess I have engaged with some of these folks, and I would say it appears that way to me.
So when this person comes in and reads a story for children, let's say a male dressed as a female.
Yes.
When they're reading any kind of story, not when they're reading those stories that we had, when I was teaching, that sometimes, you know, so-and-so has two mommies or something. Can we just read it like any old?
Right. So, exactly. Sometimes, but I don't even think as explicit as that. I think it's just sort of, I'm trying to think exactly what they've read, but it's been more of just, you know, celebrating the individual you. I would say the books that they are reading are more about celebrating, like if you're speaking to the child about like, you are amazing, what makes you you, you're a unique individual, that kind of, look into your, right. And then and then just general books.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wondered what the gripe was. Yeah.
I think the gripe is what they appear as visually and who they are as individuals.
First to hide what they are.
Potentially.
Would not exist.
Oh, that's similar.
Yeah.
Follow-up question.
Yeah.
How much value does it add, I mean this very respectfully, though, to have a drag queen story hour versus a story hour? I mean, why not just,
Yeah. How much does it add?
They're reading books that have very good content. Might you not actually get more families to come and maybe be exposed to the sorts of stories that would be read versus excluding stories or the kids of parents who wouldn't take their children?
Yeah.
The bigger, more diverse crowd of kids who would be exposed to more things.
Possibly, that is possible. I think my thinking about this is that we are providing a space for families who aren't the nuclear family to have a space to bring their families and to enjoy literature and feel supported and feel welcome in the community. But also just celebrating difference in general for all members. So this this Family Pride Day is now it's in its third year, and I think we got over 1,000 people this year, maybe even more. And it really is drawing everybody from this, like a lot of people from the Sudbury community. So I don't know if that totally answers your question, but I think it's important to, I guess when I've attended, the vibe has been, most children children love to dress up, and they're really drawn to seeing this adult who's looks very dressed up. It's very fun. They enjoy the experience, and I don't know if I'm explaining it super well, but yeah.
Has there been any effort to determine and then published what the economic effect of this? I mean, that was a pretty dramatic growth.
Yeah.
A huge increase. To address it from that perspective, what the cost?
What the cost is? I don't.
Not the cost in terms of like kids might not see, but the economic cost.
Well, I think there are people tracking the cost of staff resources and time. I think PEN America is doing a lot of that work, but I'm not sure exactly. I could definitely look into that. But the interesting thing is that some authors are starting to sort of say, it's kind of amazing to get on a banned book list because then everyone's buying my book. So, they don't like it, but they're also like, people start reading my book, and people are starting to buy my book because they want to know, and they want to support. Yeah, John.
I live in Acton, but I didn't follow. I think I was vaguely aware there was some issue with This Book Escape. But what was the story behind that, and why did it get?
I don't know. A good friend of mine was much more involved in that, and I wish I had a chance to connect with her before coming here today to kind of get a little bit more of the background information, but I don't know myself. The school committee meetings are available online, the minutes, so you could definitely read the minutes from, it was December, I think, several meetings starting in December of 2022 that you could read through. Yeah?
At what time the U.S. Postal Service to refuse to ship several books? And wrote video was about my neighbor's wife as well in sexuality, but talks about sexual freedom in America. There are some romances though written in France. The U.S. Postal Service had the right not to ship the out.
Huh.
Is that any part of this?
I don't know. I don't know about that at all.
It was a long time ago.
Yeah, I don't know. I'll have to look into that. Yeah.
Which is unwritten censorship because it deprives you the access.
The access, right. So, yeah. And something I didn't mention, but I did want to mention, is, a lot of this has been coming from the political right, but there are also, folks on the left who have approached and want certain books taken out of the collection for the opposite reason, being that there are, racial stereotypes in some classics, depictions, so I'll give you two examples. The first being Little House on the Prairie series, which I grew up loving. There are some really problematic depictions of Native Americans in those works, and there are people who feel like those should be removed from children's collections. And then Dr. Seuss. I don't know how many of you know about this, but Dr. Seuss was a political cartoonist prior to becoming a children's book author and illustrator. And in 2021, his family came out with a statement, a press release, saying that there were 6 books that they were no longer going to publish because they still had the copyright to those books. And that kind of ignited a big debate in libraries. What are we going to do with those books? So they're still, all of these titles I'm telling you are still on the shelves in our library for sure. But there's always people who feel strongly about books, and it's not just the political right. There can be folks on the left. Yes, Lee.
Presume what the reason was for this. In fact, I would love to hear what the reasoning for those.
For those 6 books, it was depictions of different racial groups.
Okay, so
Yeah.
This may be a question. I tend to look for it. Do most libraries outlet one column?
In the adult section, probably. Yes, I would think so. Yeah.
Well, great. Thank you very much, Amy.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.